So your letter has just been dropped into a blue mailbox on a quiet street corner in Ohio. You wrote an address on the front, stuck a stamp in the corner, and closed the little metal door. And that, in your mind, is the end of the story. The letter is gone. Someone will pick it up. Someone will deliver it. But here's what most people never realize. The moment that envelope leaves your hand, it enters one of the largest, oldest, and most complicated machines ever built by a single country. A machine that touches every single address in America. A machine that moves more items in a single day than Amazon, FedEx, and UPS combined. A machine that operates 31,000 buildings, 230,000 vehicles, and roughly 640,000 employees, all working around the clock to keep one impossible promise. That no matter where you live, no matter how remote, no matter how rural, no matter how difficult, mail will arrive. Every business day, for the same price. Whether you live next door to a sorting facility or on top of a mountain 50 miles from the nearest paved road. And that promise raises a very strange question. How does the United States Postal Service actually pull this off? How does a system built in the 1700s still manage to deliver a letter across an entire continent for less than the price of a candy bar? And why, even in the age of email, drones, and same-day delivery, has nothing on Earth ever truly replaced it? To understand it, you have to start with the size of the problem. The United States is enormous. It stretches nearly 3,000 miles from coast to coast. It includes deserts, mountains, swamps, islands, forests, tundra, and cities so dense that a single skyscraper contains more mailboxes than an entire small town. And unlike private carriers, USPS does not get to choose where it delivers. It has to serve everyone. That obligation is called universal service, and it's written directly into federal law. A private company can refuse an unprofitable route. USPS cannot. If there's an address, mail must go there. That single rule shapes everything about how the system works. Because the moment you promise to deliver to every address in America, you take on a challenge no company in the world would voluntarily accept. There are roughly 167 million delivery points in the United States, and that number grows by about 1 million every year. Every new house, every new apartment, every new P.O. box, every trailer in the desert, every cabin in Alaska, all of it gets added to the map, and every single one of those points has to be visited, on average, 6 days a week. So let's go back to that letter in the mailbox. Around late afternoon, a mail carrier in a right-hand drive vehicle pulls up to the box, unlocks it with a universal key called an arrow key, and empties the contents into a canvas sack. That arrow key, by the way, is one of the most protected objects in American logistics. There are only a limited number in circulation. Each one is tracked, and stealing one is a federal crime punishable by years in prison, because a single arrow key can open thousands of collection boxes across an entire region. The letter is now in the sack, mixed with hundreds of others. The carrier finishes the route and returns to the local post office. But the local post office isn't where the sorting happens. Not really. It's just a staging point. Because the real magic, the real engineering marvel of the Postal Service, happens somewhere most Americans have never seen. A place called a processing and distribution center. There are hundreds of them, scattered across the country, and they are, quite honestly, one of the most impressive industrial operations in the world. Imagine a building the size of roughly 17 football fields, humming 24 hours a day, filled with machines that can read your handwriting faster than you can. When your letter arrives at one of these centers, it's dumped onto a conveyor belt along with millions of others. The first machine it meets is called a facer canceller. Its job is to figure out which way the letter is facing, flip it if necessary, and cancel the stamp so it can never be reused. This machine processes around 30,000 letters per hour. Per machine, and every large center has dozens of them. But here's where things get genuinely surprising. Your handwriting. That messy, rushed scribble you put on the envelope. A machine is about to read it. The letter travels to something called a multi-line optical character reader, and this device photographs the front of your envelope at high speed, analyzes the image, and attempts to decode the address. If the handwriting is clear, it's decoded in milliseconds. If it's messy, the image gets uploaded to a facility called a remote encoding center, where human workers, in some cases hundreds of miles away, look at the image on a screen and type in the address manually. They have about 4 seconds per envelope. That's it. 4 seconds to read, interpret, and enter an address that a machine couldn't figure out. And for decades, one of these encoding centers, the last one still operating, has been quietly reading the handwriting of the entire country from a single building in Salt Lake City. Once the address is decoded, the machine sprays a series of orange fluorescent bars along the bottom of the envelope. Look closely at any letter you've received and you'll see them, faint, almost invisible, but they're there. Those bars are a barcode, a postal barcode. And from this moment forward, no machine in the entire system will ever need to read the address again. They'll just read the bars. Because the bars tell every future machine exactly where the letter needs to go, down to the specific carrier route, down to the specific sequence in which the carrier will walk the street. That last part is worth pausing on, because most people think of mail sorting as, well, sorting by zip code. But the modern postal service has taken this to a level that borders on absurd. Your letter isn't just sorted by state, or city, or neighborhood. It's sorted into the exact order in which your mail carrier will physically walk down your street. It's called delivery point sequencing, and it means that when the carrier grabs the stack of mail for your route in the morning, the letters are already arranged so that house number 102 comes before 104, which comes before 106, and so on. The carrier doesn't have to sort anything by hand. They just walk and deliver. This one innovation, which took decades to build, saves the Postal Service billions of dollars a year because it eliminates the single most time-consuming part of a carrier's day. But sorting is only half the challenge. The other half is moving. Because once your letter is bundled with millions of others going in the same direction, it has to physically travel across the country. And here's where the Postal Service reveals something almost nobody thinks about. USPS doesn't own most of the planes that carry its mail. Instead, it contracts with commercial airlines and dedicated cargo carriers. On any given day, roughly 2 million pounds of mail are flying through the skies of the United States, tucked into the bellies of passenger jets alongside luggage. If you've ever flown from New York to Los Angeles, there's a good chance you were sitting above thousands of letters headed to the same city. For longer distances and heavier loads, USPS uses dedicated cargo networks and long-haul trucking. There are trucks that leave a facility in Chicago at midnight and don't stop until they reach Denver. Team drivers, alternating shifts, keeping the load moving continuously. These routes are calculated with a precision that most logistics companies would envy, because every hour of delay on a trunk route cascades into missed deliveries at hundreds of local offices. And here's the strange part. The entire system runs on deadlines that are almost military in their rigidity. A letter mailed in Miami on Monday afternoon has to reach a specific processing plant by a specific time, be sorted by another specific time, be loaded onto a specific truck or plane, arrive at the destination facility by another specific time, and be handed to a carrier before their route begins. Miss any one of these windows by even 30 minutes, and the letter slips a full day. Which is why postal facilities are built around what workers call the operating plan, a rhythm so precise that clocks on the walls are synchronized to the second, and supervisors track what's called clearance time, the exact moment when the last piece of mail must leave the building. Now here's where things become much more complicated, because letters are only a small part of what USPS actually delivers today. In fact, the volume of first-class letters has been falling for years. What's exploded instead is packages, e-commerce, the world of Amazon boxes and mystery envelopes from AliExpress, and prescription bottles and birthday gifts from grandma. And here's a fact that surprises almost everyone. USPS delivers the majority of Amazon packages that arrive in rural America. Not because Amazon lacks its own trucks, but because no other carrier can profitably reach every single address the way the Postal Service can. So Amazon hands the package off, USPS carries it the last mile, and the system quietly absorbs one of the largest package flows on Earth. This is called last-mile delivery, and it is, by far, the most expensive part of the entire logistics chain. Anyone in the industry will tell you the same thing. Moving a package across the country is cheap. Moving it the final 3 miles to a specific door is where all the cost lives. Fuel, vehicles, labor, time. A single carrier might drive a route that covers only 10 miles but takes 8 hours, because they stop hundreds of times. And in rural America, a carrier might drive 150 miles in a single day to deliver just a few dozen items. On some Alaskan routes, mail is delivered by bush plane, landing on gravel strips carved out of the wilderness. In parts of Arizona, mail is carried by mule down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, to a tiny village of about 200 people. That mule route is the last official mule-delivered mail route in America, and it exists for one reason: universal service. Because the law says everyone gets mail, even the people at the bottom of a canyon. Which brings us to the money. Because if you're delivering to 167 million addresses, 6 days a week, using 230,000 vehicles and paying more than 500,000 employees, the cost has to come from somewhere. And this is where the story gets genuinely uncomfortable. USPS is a self-funded agency. It does not receive tax dollars for its operations. Every stamp, every package fee, every certified letter, every P.O. box rental has to cover the entire cost of running the system. And for years, that math has not worked. The Postal Service has lost tens of billions of dollars over the past decade and a half. Not because it's mismanaged, at least not primarily, but because of a combination of factors that would sink almost any private business. For one, the price of a first-class stamp is regulated. UPS cannot simply raise prices to match its costs. Any increase has to be approved by a federal regulator. For another, USPS was required for years to pre-fund the health benefits of its future retirees, a burden imposed by Congress that no other federal agency or private company faced. And most importantly, the volume of letters, its most profitable product per ounce, has been in a long decline as email replaced physical correspondence. Yet the obligation to deliver has not changed. Fewer letters, same 167 million addresses, same 6-day promise, same universal price. It's a business model that would be considered impossible if it hadn't been operating for over 2 centuries. Because that's the other thing people forget. The United States Postal Service is older than the country itself. It was created in 1775, before the Declaration of Independence was signed, and Benjamin Franklin was its first postmaster general. Its original purpose was almost revolutionary. Franklin believed that a democracy could not survive without the free flow of information, and that meant a mail system that reached every citizen, regardless of wealth or geography. That founding idea, radical for its time, is the same principle that still forces mail carriers up mountains and across deserts today. But here's what most people never realize. The Postal Service is not just delivering mail. It's holding together the physical infrastructure of American commerce and identity in ways that don't become visible until it breaks. Consider what actually flows through the mail. Prescription medications. About a quarter of all prescriptions in the United States are delivered by USPS. Miss a delivery and someone might miss a dose of insulin, or heart medication, or chemotherapy. Ballots. Tens of millions of Americans vote by mail, and every one of those envelopes moves through the Postal Service. Court summonses, tax refunds, Social Security checks, passports, driver's licenses, immigration documents, business contracts, bank cards. When people say the mail is essential, they don't just mean the boxes from Amazon. They mean the invisible backbone of everyday American life. Now consider what happens when the system is stressed. During the pandemic, package volumes spiked overnight. USPS suddenly had to handle a Christmas-level rush every single week for months. Some facilities began to buckle, mail piled up, deliveries were delayed, and Americans, many for the first time, discovered just how much they depended on a service they had always taken for granted. The complaints were loud. The frustration was real. But behind the scenes, exhausted workers were putting in 14-hour shifts, machines were being pushed past their designed capacity, and managers were rewriting the operating plan on the fly. The system bent. It groaned. But it didn't break, because the Postal Service has a strange, almost stubborn resilience built into its DNA. Every processing plant has backup power.